Kevin McGarry here, your masterclass prognosticator, your provocateur at Y'all Woked Up University. I am the premier professor of Y'all Woked Up, and so just like to share some more ideas with you. There's been a lot of discussion. You know, it's funny how this works. Every time when we're getting into a political season, the discussion amps up quite a bit about white supremacy. So I think we should spend a little bit of time really trying to dissect what is white supremacy and where did it come from? How did it get started? So that's actually one of the things that I discuss quite often, particularly actually, in my book, Woked Up. Oh, come on. There, here we go. In my book, Woked Up. So it's finally putting an axe to the taproot of white supremacy and racism in America. You can find it at Amazon. And just put in Woked Up, and you'll get access to that. But here's the thing. Why don't we talk a little bit about white supremacy and racism, where it came from? Let's talk a little bit about history. Okay, so let's go back to the 1770s. There was actually a gentleman who took the first sort of I guess it was his first look at trying to do classifications, race classifications. It was 1770. His name was Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. Now, Johann Friedrich Blumenbach was a naturalist, materialist kind of person. He's a scientist. He was noted. Did a lot of research on, skulls and development of skulls between various ethnicities. He did most of his work around race classification. He wanted to find out whether there were indeed any real disparities between the various races. So he took a look at skull formation, cranial formation, and those types of things between these races. And he came up with 5 race classifications. And basically, it was 5 of the most populated continents at the time. Caucasians were in Europe. Americans were Native Americans in those. Indigenous folks. We had Mongolians that were sort of southeastern Asia, Malayan, 5 classifications basically. So here's the deal. He didn't look at skin color. He looked at 5 race classifications. The other thing that he noted was, because the African continent was the Ethiopian race. So the other thing that he noted is, look, there is no cognitive or intellectual distinction between Africans and, people in the black race compared with any other race. So that's what he noted. That was his finding. So then comes Thomas Malthus. Malthus was, sometime later, it was in the early 1800s, he was, a radical environmentalist type. He was really paranoid about the earth, its size, its capacity for resources. He really felt that, wow, if we overpopulate the earth will collapse, it will have scarcity of resources, and it really comes down to the survival of the fittest. He was the one that was whispering in his younger cousin's ear about survival of the fittest, scarcity of resources, and those things, when his younger cousin Charles Robert Darwin started to write his initial theories. So Malthus had a profound effect on his younger cousin. He was supremely white supremacist. What I mean by that is he believed that Caucasians had the best, most cognitively developed, most intellectual, most resourceful race of any other race on the planet. He really felt that other ethnicities were catching up, however, with their population and soon would overtake the Caucasian, European, white race, Aryan race. So he says, look, to his younger cousin, he says, look, we really have to come up with some kind of mechanism by way we can help manage population growth amongst these other ethnicities. Pretty soon, we'll have scarce resources. We'll have, whites that will be, outnumbered by all these other races. And this is a real problem. So he was such a white supremacist that he married his first cousin. He really believed that he wanted to preserve his intellectual capacity within his family unit. So he married his first cousin. Notably, his younger cousin, Charles Darwin, also married his first cousin for the same reasons. He was a white supremacist, and he wanted to make sure that he sort of maintained his pure intellectual white Aryan Caucasian gene pool within his family. So anyway, he did it as well. But here's the impact that Malthus had on Darwin. When Darwin was writing his theories, he encouraged him to write Survival of the Fittest, to include in that disparities between races. So here we have a person that now is coming up and he's saying, look, races are not all equal, like our first race classification guy, Blumenbach, stated. There should be some distinction between races. He says, as a matter of fact, you talk about evolution, and that's part and parcel of your theory. So why don't we actually sort of reclassify? Because blacks, why don't we reclassify them as subhuman, as being lower in the evolutionary scale? And so Darwin, in his works, in The Descent of Man, he goes full on with his older cousin's prompting. And you'll see in The Descent of Man, his second book, where he does this classification of the pure white Aryan Caucasian race as the top of the food chain. And he classifies blacks as subhuman, gorillas, apes, savages. Yeah, Darwin did it. This is... Now, I don't want you to mischaracterize what I'm saying here. Supremacy of any ethnic tribe, or tribalism was real. When people came in contact with other ethnicities, they believed that they were superior. This is, since the fall of man, we've had people doing racial and ethnic strife between various ethnic groups, and that. So that's just the way it is, and it has been. But prior to Darwin's designation of this sort of scientific, because remember, Darwin was well noted, well heeled, well respected amongst the entire world community at the time. His proclamations, his theories were taken very, very seriously. Since he made the proclamation about whites being superior to all other ethnicities, that was white supremacy. When he made the distinction of blacks being subhuman, that really was a big game changer. Because remember, we had slavery going on at the time. And so the slave owners really kind of did it opportunistically. They felt that they had, a big economic gain by bringing folks from other ethnicities, and especially the African continent, since we had so many African traders that were working with the Europeans, to bring all the Africans over here, a lot of the Africans over here, and enslave them. And that was good. That was good work, and it helped them economically. But when Darwin came out with the fact that, look, we don't feel anything, we don't feel bad for blacks because they're subhuman, they're low on the evolutionary scale. You shouldn't have any compunction or feelings about these folks. They're subhuman. They're apes. They're low on the evolutionary scale. They're one step up from the parasite level. So that was when things really kicked in high gear. There was no real urgency to end slavery because some really took that to heart. Look, these people are subhuman. We could treat them any kind of way. It doesn't matter. We could, So that is the genesis. That's the instantiation of white supremacy and racism. It came by way of Charles Robert Darwin, a noted scientist for the first time in human history, who made the distinction of Aryan, Caucasian, European, white supremacy and compared to subhumans of blacks. And so since that time, we've had that distinction. Since that time, we had it carried forth with his protégés, which would be Marx and Engels. Marx was a horrible racist, believed every word of Darwin. So he spoke disparagingly of blacks, his own son-in-law. He called Negrillo and the gorilla and the N-word. Jews, he would call the N-word, Jewish N-words. Marx was steeped in this stuff. So, when you have your people around today that are proud, Darwinians and Marxists, excuse me, while they're pointing the finger at you for being a white supremacist and racist, excuse me, we have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of actual, connecting the dots that we should be doing and helping people to understand that these people are not to be heralded or respected. These people are to be rebuked. Marxists need to be rebuked for being a Marxist, because they're the ones that are literally carrying forward white supremacy and racism by virtue of their ideology. We have Darwinism being taught from kindergarten through, master class in universities, and yet we don't have parents, demanding that Darwin is taken out of our schools, because it's the kind of philosophies that could really taint and bring forth white supremacy and racism. It's time, folks, that we start to do something about the genesis of white supremacy and racism in America. Now, if you are not a white supremacist or racist, then it'd be easy for you to say, look, I didn't know prior, but guess what? I'm here forward. I denounce and renounce Darwinism and Marxism. And so everyone should be encouraged to do that based on the facts that are presented again in this book. And after you read it, you'll see very, very clearly where the lines are, where the dots are connected, and how white supremacy and racism has continued, the structures of it, to this very day. So, anyway, there you go. A quick masterclass explanation of white supremacy and racism. Isn't that ironic, though? Let me just one side note, that the very people, including the person at the top, our president and others around him, they're quite encouraging, quite endorsing of Darwinism and Marxism, while pointing the finger at white supremacy as being the number one threat in America. The number one threat in America? Over and above terrorism and all that, white supremacy is the number one threat? Well, I guess if you expose Darwinism from K to 16 and continue to press the pedal to the metal on Marxism, maybe he's correct. Maybe indeed white supremacy of Marxism and of Darwinism, maybe indeed that's the number one threat. I say we do something about it. Let's educate folks. Get the book. It's in Amazon. Woked Up. Finally putting an axe to the taproot of white supremacy and racism. All right? I hope you learned something this time. Let's all get woked up. Let's get it. All right. God bless you. We'll see you next time.